The Federal Executive Council has announced the award of a $21 million contract for the metering of 187 crude oil flow stations in Nigeria to properly account for the country's production and exports. It also disclosed that the council awarded another contract for the deployment of software that will enable the government to monitor the movement of Nigeria's crude from the point of loading of every cargo in Nigeria up to the point of the cargo's destination. The Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, Heineken Olokpobiri, who disclosed this at a press briefing in Abuja, stated that the initiatives would further give clarity on the volumes of crude produced in the country, as well as the amount exported to other nations. Now, one of the key approvals by the Federal Executive Council has to do with awarding a contract for the metering of 187 flow stations across the Niger Delta region of Nigeria by the Nigerian Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission. Lokpobiri pointed out that the approved cost for the deployment of the meters was $21 million, adding that it would be complemented with advanced cargo tracking technology. Let's cross over to Nigeria now and speak to a senior consultant and energy analyst in Nigeria, Dr. Wisdom, and now who joins via Zoom. Doc, good evening, and thank you for your time.
Hi, good evening, Emmanuel. Thank you very much for having me.
Right, so how's Nigeria?
Very good, and things are going well. I think the government are putting the right policy directions for moving the industry, the oil and gas industry, forward.
Fantastic. Now, so should I take it that before now, you didn't have any monitoring mechanism? Because sometime back, even though Nigeria is way ahead of Ghana, Ghana had some kind of meter flows upstream to check the quantity and things like that of oil flow from offshore to onshore. It doesn't mean that Nigeria over the years has not had anything like this.
No, that's not the case. There are two things. We've had the metering provision, but the thing is, right, in the first instance, the meters were installed by the international oil and gas companies and the national oil and gas companies. And they were the ones that were reporting whatever flow they were passing across those lines. And when they report those, the flow that was going through those lines, the question was there a way for the government to actually have a way of verifying independently through their own equipment, what was really going on those, on those flow lines? And the answer is no. So a lot of these companies were the ones reporting, and at the end of the day, once you allow companies to report their own flow, you are at the mercy of whatever they tell you. So at this point, I think the government is now saying we will get our own meters retrofitted so we can check the custody transfer of this crude, the custody transfer of the gas, and then use that as a way to implement and enhance, pipeline security.
Now, is this intervention coming on board now because Aliko Dangote complained recently that he's not getting enough crude into his refinery? Is that the case?
No, because even if we wanted to deliver crude to the Dangote refinery, it wouldn't be through at the moment, it wouldn't be through the pipelines, because, I mean, if you look at our export centers, they take, they're loaded, the crude is loaded on a ship, and then Dangote also has a dock where the ship would berth, and then he would unload any crude onto his tank farm and then move on to the refining facility. That's not the case. It is the case of, that I think Nigeria has come to the realization that you cannot really track your volumes. You cannot say for certain how much you're losing, whether through lack of production optimization or how much you're losing through theft if you don't meter. Now, let me just give you context, right? When we talk about crude oil theft, for example, I like to put out a model that I call PDRR. It's a predict, detect, respond, and recover. Now, when you look at what metering would do, when you gather a lot of the flow cycles, it helps you from a prediction standpoint to understand your flow patterns. It also helps you to understand exactly how what you can do to optimize and when your wells are not behaving properly and what are the factors, because you capture pressure and you capture your flow rate. It lets you understand the wells a little bit better, or the flow streams a little bit better. Then you look at the detect. When you're able to meter, you can tell when there's when your pressures are going down, when your flow rates are going down, you can tell that something has tampered with those pipelines, and you can intervene. Of course, the response and recover is to look at it. When you do a scenario analysis, you're saying, if this happens, this is a scenario happens, this is how we're going to respond, and this is how we're going to recover. So essentially, it's not about the Dangote refinery. It is more to do with the fact that we need to enhance the security, and there's no way you can do that without technology. Now, let me say something really quick. There are three critical barriers when it comes to the implementation of technology, of security. You have the people barrier, you have the equipment barrier, and you have the process barrier. The equipment barrier is fantastic. That's the metering itself. Process barriers are the protocols that you take to review your results and then interpret those results and what it means, and then how you then create your execution strategy depending on what sort of priority you give to the signals and that you get from your equipment. But the people barriers are one of the most important, because they are the ones that control the equipment and the process itself. So now, these are some of the drivers.
Yes. Doc, to what extent is this particular, or are these metering systems going to be effective? Because we still have a human interface to it, and things can happen along the line. So to what extent would it ensure accountability along the flow pattern of crude oil?
Correct. And that's essentially what I said, that the people barriers control the equipment, the people barrier controls the process. So when you're talking about to what extent, it is to the extent that we, the people that are, put in, the position of control, to make sure that we make sure the equipment and the processes work, that we do not sabotage the system. Ultimately, there is no system that does not have to trust, even on the human interface, because the human interface have the overarching effect on the effectiveness and the efficiency of any system or equipment, and that's basically what it is down to. We Nigerians must make sure this works. And again, right, when it comes to implementation, there's another thing that I like to say. We need to implement this in a way that we draw insight and we use it to make informed decisions, because I'm tired of people bringing up pet projects and then it becomes convenient because they give these contracts to their own cronies and then they execute it, get the money, but there's no real, insights or data consumption or mining from there to take real decisions. If that's lacking, we need to get to a point where you're not just gathering data, but you're drawing insights from the data and you're creating models for decision making offline. That's essentially where we want to be, not just doing a pet project, doing a political buzzword and everybody's clapping about it. That's not what we want at the moment.
Right. So the contract is $21 million. Right? Is it going to a foreign company or a Nigerian company?
I haven't gotten details about how they're executing that contract at the moment. But what I do know is that because of the local content, they might give one broad party and then cut it down to a number of parties under the that are being licensed to give to provide metering services. But what we may find is when we're doing the design philosophy and the project basis, we might standardize the metering equipment so that it allows interchangeability across the fields. We might standardize some of the technology so that it's uniform and it's easy to build the sort of a technological interpretation center, where we can, we know that if we're using Siemens, for example, technology, we know we're going with Siemens and we do understand how to work with Siemens technology. So I see some commonalities in terms of the technology. Well, I do know that after that has been set from a project design basis standpoint, they will then give it out to a number of companies that qualify under those categories so that everyone can have a fair share of the local content effect of those projects.
Right. Thank you so much. Dr. Wisdom Enang is a senior consultant and also an energy analyst in Nigeria. And he joined us to talk about the current situation in Nigeria's petroleum sector, where a contract of $21 million has been awarded for metering provisions, metering of 187 crude oil flow stations in Nigeria to properly account for the country's production and exports.